From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosabianco. What's on tap today, Lou?
Matthew, a small business owner, as we know, we talk about this all the time, has to wear many, many hats. But one hat that cannot be ignored in the small business space is the real estate hat. So today we have Victor Bell, entrepreneur, real estate maven, author, and all around really cool cat. Victor, welcome to the podcast. Talk to us what real estate has done to you and your family's life.
Oh, wow. Hey, thanks for that great intro too, man. Thanks again for having me on the show. I love what you guys are doing. Real estate, honestly, has saved me. I don't even know where I'd be without it. Did you kind of want me to go over how I started? Would that be a good place?
Once upon a time.
All right. So I give you the cliff notes because I can go deep and I want to make sure to kind of be mindful of the time. So, I left home when I was pretty young. I left home at my mother's house when I was 12 and a half, got to my dad when I was about 13 or so, had my first daughter when I was 14, 15 in that age. So I was kind of floating, I got kicked out of high school. Went to a different school to kind of finish up. And, long story short, naturally you go through all that stuff. I joined the military, got in the military, got from Texas. I got stationed in Hawaii. And then when I got out, I went to college on that free money they promised me. And, when that first semester, I got called into, the counselor and all that stuff. And they're like, hey, if you come back, you're going to owe us money. And I was like, really? Yeah. So they're like, you have to actually show up. You can't just get a check. So that put me on a different path. So I ended up started hustling and I got in trouble, got probation. So I was on probation for 5 years. And in Texas, it's a legit deal because you're going to either go to jail or you're going to do what you have to do. So I was working this job in Austin and everyone hated that job. So people who had been there for like 10 years hated it. People who were new like me also hated it. It was a good job, but it was like, whoa, like this is it. Like, this is where we're at. Because I was looking around like, all right, military, did that, got kicked out of school, felony charge, on probation now, and also dropped out of college. So like I have burned a lot of bridges. So, something happened. I was driving home one night because I worked nights at that job and I fell asleep, woke up on the side of the road and I was like, all right, I got to fix something. So the next day I went to, you guys remember Hastings, the bookstore? Kind of like Barnes and Nobles, but
Sure.
Yeah. So it's closed now. But I ended up going there during the day on my way to work. And I was like, I'm going to find something. And I found a book and it was like Fast Cash with Real Estate by Ron LeGrand. And that first year I did $1.2 million in real estate in Texas. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that where I was at that moment was not going to work. Like I was like, all right, everybody hates it. It makes no sense for me. So, and I've always kind of been a why kid. Is like, if I was someplace, a lot of controls, I'm like, why do we have to do that? So it wasn't that I guess I was a rebel because I wasn't just a follower, if that made sense. So I knew the real estate piece was mine. So that's that's truly the cliff notes of everything, but that's how I got started. But I've been doing that for 20 years.
Let's break that down though. Were you flipping houses? Were you buying tax liens? What was the book teaching you to do? Were you wholesaling?
So basically the book said, all these new words just came out recently, like flipping and wholesaling and all that stuff. But technically it was a sign of contract. It was a assignment of contract, right? Now it's called wholesaling, but it wasn't then. Or whatever people call it. I don't know.
It's the same concept. It'll be called something new in 10 years too.
Yeah, it'll be something else, right? So, whatever. So what happened was that book said, get the newspaper, call and read this script. And that script was probably the same script everybody was using. I don't use that anymore, but it was like, is this the least amount you could take for your house? Is that the best you can do? So, so I basically got that book in like 2 weeks had to go by. So I didn't buy the book right away. I kept going to the bookstore, but I got the book and I sat down at work in the evening with the newspaper and I cold called the numbers in the newspaper. And I finally got a guy that had like a house for 30 grand. And I was like, will you take 15 grand for it? And he's like, yeah, I own an Exxon. drive down by the shop, bring me the money. And I was like, oh, hell, I don't have the money for that. And but the book also said to call, ironically, it was like, I mistook it because all these words I had never been exposed to. Right? I was like, call management companies and then call banks, ask for their REO department and see if you can talk to somebody about, money and a bunch of other stuff. So I started cold calling out of the phone book in Austin from the A's and got all the way to the S's of these managed mortgage companies. And I got in contact with somebody who was like, you don't even know what you're doing, do you? And I was like, no. And he's like, you know what? How'd you get this number? And I was like, the phone book. He's like, you cold call all the numbers in the Austin phone book was like this big. If you guys remember, get that timeline. So I went to his office and his name was Bob and Jamie. Jamie actually works with me. She's my investor relations manager now, but they own that company. And they were like, here's what you're going to do. And I told him, and he was like, you know what, call that guy back and see if he has any more properties. So I called him back and he was like, yeah, I got 300 properties. How many you want? And I was like, oh, wow. He's like, you know what, let me kind of go through what we got. Let me get with my brothers and let's see what we can do. Because their last name was Mayo, the Mayo family. They own a lot of real estate there in Colleen. So yeah, so that's how I got those. It was like 24 properties. That one property that was in the newspaper was a house. All the rest of them were small multi-families. So they were duplexes, triplexes. So I got in, to your question, my goal was just to get it. I didn't know, get a deal, get some. All I was like, all right, I'm going to read this script. Like I was literally going, okay, chapter 2 says do this. So I was like, okay, I was really going from chapter to chapter. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that what I was trying to get out of, I wasn't going to go do that.
Dude, ignorance is a superpower, especially when you're first starting out.
It's still my superpower. I have no idea what I'm doing sometimes, but I'm like, you know what? It's like to a hammer, everything's a nail. That's like our thing. Like with my team, I'm like, look, we're hammers. We're just going to go get it done. We don't care what it looks like. We'll clean it up later. So, that's it. So, yeah, but that's how I got started. So, so ironically, that's why I said I didn't know what I was doing because now I had all these tenants, and the worst deal out of that whole package was really that house, which is how I learned that I'm not a fixer guy. I'm not, not a contractor. And then later I learned how to do subject to deals, pretty houses, which I've done a lot of those. So that's kind of outside of the.
We dive into that a little bit because that's a topic that's been coming up a lot lately, especially with rates going higher, right? So Can you explain to the audience exactly what a subject to deal is? Because a couple have come across me and Luigi's desk for us to invest in, and there just seems to be a lot of working parts. So I'd love to hear from somebody who's actually done them before, not these guys that are saying, yeah, I do them all the time. And, me and my partner's done them all the time. How many have you done? 0 of them.
I've probably done over 100. I've probably done over 100 deals, and out of all of my real estate transactions that were small deals and single family stuff, 95% of them are subject to deals because I don't do the other ones.
So explain it to the audience what a subject to deal is. Let's explain.
So,
let's walk through that.
So subject to means you're taking over the property subject to its existing financing staying in place. So the reason why that works is because you can put that asset into a trust, and then naturally you become the beneficiary of that trust. And the Garn-St. Germain Act of 82 says that you can put your asset into a trust without triggering the due on sale clause, because technically, by all accounts and purposes, you still own the asset. It's just going into a trust for estate planning purposes. That is that small loophole that came through. So that's how it's done. So naturally, that's how I do it. And when you put that property into a trust, naturally you have the beneficiary transfer beneficial interest of the trust to you as the trustee. So then there you go. That's how you're able to do that. So the loan stays in their name. Now you own the asset. You own the trust that owns the asset. And then you turn around and sell, refinance, resell that property, or hold that property as a rental property for as long as whatever, because your trust outlines that the trustee can do that.
So how do you actually get people to be able to say, yeah, I'll keep my name on the mortgage. Don't worry about that. That's fine. How do you get around that?
You ask. So the last deal that we did, we just sold off one of my properties that we had in that was August. I just sold that off. I picked that one up in Hawaii, but I was here. Same scenario. They were going through a scenario. They owned the property. That property was in pre-foreclosure. They were behind. It was a beautiful property. In an area where like near a marina and all that other stuff. I only do nice houses. You don't want to take over an ugly property subject to. Some people like to do that. I don't. I'm like, hey, if I can't get rid of this thing if I get it on a Monday, can I sell it by Friday if I had to, or put somebody in it? Then I'll do it, right? So we have a joke. If I don't have to talk my wife off the ledge from wanting to move into it, it's not a good deal, right? So I was like, oh, this is beautiful. We should move in it. But that said, though, yeah, in that situation, I was like, hey, guys, here's literally my script. Like I teach it. I share it. I also have a training program. I go through people with it. I'm like, look, typically we take over the payments and we'll make them until we get the property resold, as long as the house qualifies. That sounds like something you want to do. How's that work? We'll make the payments. The payments will stay in your name, and then until we get the property resold. It's kind of it. So, and then at some point they're going to be like, what if you don't make the payments? Well, they're in pre-foreclosure, and like, well, you're not making the payments. So it's like, that that's where that is. And if it's, because not all of my deals are pre-foreclosure. Sometimes they're like, man, we got 2 properties. We're thinking about renting this one out. We used to live in it. We bought this other one. We can't handle both payments. And I'm like, well, I'll just make the payments on this one until I can get it resold. How long is that going to take? I don't know. Could be 2 weeks, could be 2 years. I'm responsible for the property until that time happens. And this is a business. It's got to make money for me to take over your situation.
I have a feeling we're going to see that in the second home market, where everybody ran out over the last couple of years and bought Airbnbs, right?
Yeah.
Have full-time jobs, and with the layoffs coming through, they're not going to be able to handle both payments.
So not the last deal I got, but the 2 deals I got before that, just a couple months before, they were both of those things. They were vacation rentals. People bought them, and they were making money hand over fist. That opportunity for vacation rentals stopped in the area where they were at. And then all of a sudden, they're like, all right, we don't want this thing. And then I was like, cool, I'll take it. So, but that's easy. So the difference of that is, like, to your point, that's going to run rampant. I learned how to do that after I got that big portfolio of properties. I learned from a buddy of mine named Will, and he was like, here's what you need to do. And once I learned that, I was like, I'll never do that other thing again. So I may get less deals, but like I'll make, 50, 100 grand, 120,000. It's so different, and they're nice properties. So, but the thing is, and I learned this because I the people I started learning from, they're, how it is when people succeed, they stick a camera in your face. Tell us about your successes. And but there was times when people were like, hey, this is wholesale. Do the wholesale. We call it the ugly house business, which is now the wholesale business or flippers. They were like, yeah, do this. So they're out there teaching it. And then I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, no, we do subject twos. And I'm like, so why don't you tell them that? And they were like, to your point, it's like, it's such a dynamic piece that it's really hard to tell the general public to go out there and grab people's properties that are either motivated, same motivations, motivated. These are nicer properties. And then take control of those assets, because you don't know who you're telling to do that. There has to be a very high level of integrity and ethics.
Victor, as we know in business, not everything that shines is gold, right?
Absolutely.
And you're obviously a pro, and you've been doing this for a very long time, and you figured out your Goldilocks zone.
Yeah.
Walk the audience through some of the repercussions and some of the pitfalls when subject to doesn't work out properly.
Great question. So, because I have had that happen. Number one, I took over a property that I knew I have now I have this thing. It says, 2 things. So one, I took over a property that I shouldn't. So there's a thing in there. You heard me say in that little pitch, as long as your house qualifies. So sometimes you have to say, hey, we're going to get the property in a contract, and then we're going to go walk the site. We're going to walk the property, whatever. So I took over a property. One specific comes to mind. Like everyone has that. I walked this guy's property. I have this thing. Real estate has a people problem, a property problem, or a financial problem. If they have all 3, say no. Simple as that. This guy had all 3. I walked the property. I was looking. He and I went into contract, and I was like, yeah, I'm interested. I got there, and I was like, no way, man. I'm not interested. It has all 3 problems. Good luck. So I said no. And then he called a couple of, like 3 days before his foreclosure sale, because this deal was going to foreclosure. It was actually a triplex. And he was like, man, is there anything you could do? And I was like, no, man, I'm not interested. This is a shit show. And he was like, oh, man, anything. So I was like, I'll talk to some of my buddies in the office because my office was inside of another office, a real estate office, a mortgage company, and somebody wanted to do it. And I was like, fine, I'll let you do it. I'll just go ahead and move my position out. And he did. So 6 months later, he starts fixing this place up. And then when they checked, somebody wanted to buy it, they checked title. And then that guy went back and tried to sue us. But he used our expired contract to go back and say, hey, they said that there was no money in this deal. Because I was like, hey, maybe we can give you $100,000 because the profit margin seemed so big. But when I got there, I saw the amount of work because again, this should be nice. I was like, no, man, I'm not interested in that. I drew that up, for us to inspect. But now that we're out of that, I'm not interested. So he sued me off the basis of that contract because I didn't go back and do a cancellation of contract. That was my lesson. Right. And, we went through mitigation and stuff. And as a matter of fact, the judge, fired his attorney for say it was one of those attorneys that you get, like if you fall in a grocery store, you go. So that's one of those deals is, there is those deals, which is why I said you got to be extremely ethical and you got to have your own personal boundaries. But that came from trying to do pretty houses from, I say this all the time, multifamily too, buying properties from an irresponsible owner, right? So you have an ugly property, you have a person who doesn't want to take responsibility because this is subject to is a business of responsibility. So that's one, right? So getting a bad property. Number two, which I've stayed away from this, is because sometimes, like you said, who's going to do this? You say, hey, here's how this works. They get into the closing piece. And because we have a ton of, we call them CYA letters, but they're disclosures. You understand. So I over disclose, hey, I'm taking over the payments. The payments are going to stay in your name. By the lender's right, they could call the loan due, right? But I'm going to be sending the payments. They're probably not going to do that. And we're going to talk to them to make sure you're all good. But they can do that. And you agree to hold me harmless. So as soon as I get any pushback on that stuff, I'm like, you know what? We're not going to do it. No big deal. It doesn't matter. That's the second piece. If I get pushback, where like Matt said, they don't understand. But I made sure they understand. Typically, it's not that they don't understand. They've talked to their buddy and they were like, oh man, I could do that. And then now all of a sudden they have another way. And they're really just trying to get out of it. Right? Until they get to the place where they realize, oh shit, there's a lot of work. We should have let Victor did it because he's done so many of these. I already know what your attorney's going to say, what your mortgage company's going to say, what the insurance company's going to say when I sell it. I know how to handle the title company. I got realtor on my team that's already done enough deals with me. They know the subject to business, and so do I, because they understand how I do deals. So to answer your question, it's like those are some of the pitfalls that people look out for. There's a third one, but that one keeps us out. Aside from like, don't do a bad deal. Be aware of people who are just irresponsible, so they're going to push back on anybody. They're going to cry foul. And then the last one is like, if it's going to look bad in court, don't do it. So let's say you got a grandmother, she owns, the property and, she only owes $100,000 on it, but it's worth $1 million. That looks bad. So like the deal I just talked about, they weren't a grandmother, but they were a family. They were going through something personal. So there was, we took it over for $625,000. We sold it for $1,050,000. A lot of equity. So, in that call, I was like, hey, why don't we do this? Because, I do this a lot. Like, I'll take over the property and I'll split the profit with you 50-50 as long as the place qualifies. I don't know what we're going to make, but that makes sense. Sure.
Now, Victor, Matt and I always say that real estate is like politics. It's grassroots, right? So it's geographically specific. Mm-hmm. Walk us through how careful you are in maintaining that geographic specificity so you become an expert on whatever, 5, 10, 20 zip codes.
So I've done that in different zip codes where like you see like, hey, I've done it in 8, states, but primarily it's because, okay, I'm from Texas. I was traveling and doing stuff, but those are like more multifamily deals that I was doing or bigger assets. So yeah, to your point, I'm personally a person that likes to do deals in my location. So naturally I live in San Diego County now, I live in Oceanside, and I'm from Hawaii. So most of my stuff came from there. So I'm a big advocate of doing business in your own backyard. There's deals everywhere. So to your point, that's how I've been able to do it. Cause I'm like, dude, I'm just going to do business where I'm at. Unless I have a partner that's someplace else and they're like prominent in the area. They live there. They understand it. And then I can just be the deal guy. I'm like, hey, if you find them, let's get them on the phone, but you know what you're doing. You guys can oversee that stuff. And I don't mind flying back and forth. Right. So, yeah. So I think that's important to kind of point out. So that was a great question.
So Victor, how do you manage these properties, right? Because this isn't a side hustle for you. This is
No.
your job. You're raising a family in the real estate business. Like unlike Matt and I, we will do a real estate deal once in a while, but it's not our bread and butter. This is your bread and butter. Do you have a management company that helps you manage this? Do you have an internal team? Like when there's a leaky faucet or the door hinge is loose, who do you send?
We have a management. Well, in Hawaii, we had a management company for all our apartment buildings. The fund that we're building right now, that's going to have a management company because we're raising capital right now for Fund 1. So we haven't got a deal here in San Diego, but we're going to be working with a professional management company. It doesn't make sense to do that. But even then, like I said, I'm not a man. I don't even cut my own grass. But and that's not a bad. I mean, that's not like me being lazy either. It's just not my thing. I've always had maintenance guys to do that. So the way that I get maintenance people for any of our, multifamily stuff, any subject to deals, because naturally you get a nice deal, you're still going to do floor and paint and spruce that up a little bit. So I use it because I look at so many apartment buildings all the time. There's always maintenance people out there. So I'm always like, hey man, do you do side gigs on the weekend? Yeah, we do. Hey, you know what? Who does flooring? Because, and then I'll start, putting their numbers in my phone and I'll ask. Because those guys do that all the time. They do dress type maintenance and repair stuff. So they can bang out a floor, paint, a unit on the weekend, right? When they're not working their other job because they're already trained for that. So that's how I do that. So to your point, yeah, I don't do any of that. And any of the subject to deals that we've also sold off, we sell them on a rent to own. So we get somebody to come in, put a decent sized down payment. They're responsible for all the maintenance and repairs of that property. And aside from the roof, and because I'll take care of that. But that's it. So I don't do any of that. Once we get a deal, it's like, hey, I got a deal. I start banging it hard to find the tenant buyer. They put a decent sized down payment. We make them responsible for all maintenance and repairs, build a payment history on them, and then get them to buy it 2 years in the future.
Now, Victor, introduce us to Mr. Bell, the author. What compelled you to put ink to paper and write a book, and what's that book meant for your business?
Wow. So I have a couple of books. I have 30 Days of War. That was kind of a business owner / personal development book. When I had a gym. We used to train MMA fighters, wrestlers, special forces candidates in Hawaii. I did that for 10 years. So that was my second segue into a book. The other one was never published. The real estate book was because I'm doing what I'm doing right now. It's like multifamily. That's the thing that I love. I want that the most. And I've done more of that educational piece. And I'm sure you guys know multifamily is a different animal than single family. So people were asking me questions and I was like, I'll just write a book about it. I'm talking about it all the time. The way that I treat books though is a little different from, I think, the way that other people are. I think a lot of people in the book and author space, they're thinking, oh man, I'm going to be an author. I'm going to make a bunch of money. Everyone's going to know me. And I'm like, books are not for that. When I write a book, and I'm honest and transparent about it, I'm writing a book because I'm writing it for a very specific group of people that I want to get in front of. I'm going to make sure that I'm available. The information's good. It's going to be great information. It clears up questions. So let's say Matthew and Luigi, I met you guys. I'm going to take my book and be like, hey, I'm going to mail it to Matthew. I'm going to mail one to Luigi. Luigi, you and I talked about motorcycle racing and stuff, and then, Matt, you and I talk. We have some common friends with Ryan. And I'm going to fold one page over because if you're busy like me, you're not going to read somebody's whole book. But I can get you to read a page and go, hey, man, I thought about you. I folded a page. Read that. I know you're going to love it. And I bang that book out. So now if I do that, of all the people like we went to when we met, and we met 40 people at an event. And then
we should tell this story because this is a pretty good story. So me and Luigi's in New York. I'm in Florida. We flew out to San Diego. Our CFO was with us. We were at a mergers and acquisitions event. And just sitting around the table, Luigi's talking to Victor, right? And we get to talking, and we know a lot of the same people. And then, like, I don't know, a week later, 2 weeks later, we get an inquiry for somebody to be on a podcast. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, Lou, we were just eating lunch with this guy 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Whole world, man.
For sure. And that matters, right? It's similar to the book thing. Because it's like, and we hear it all the time. It's like, how can we meet the right people, talk about the right things, things like that. So like you guys have a podcast, like we've met live. Now we're here, we have a book, like all these things matter to people, especially in the business space, the entrepreneur space, real estate space, aside from just the authority piece, it's information, but it also allows somebody to step into a room that they didn't have. that's one of my buddies argues about that. He's like, well, I don't really need those things. They don't work. And I'm like, well, if there's two people that are going to get invited to speak, I have a book, you don't. They're probably going to pick me.
Victor, I'm curious one thing when it comes to your real estate business.
Sure.
You've experienced a lot of different transactions. You've been involved in a lot of different deals.
Yeah.
What is it about the multifamily space that attracted you? Because it seems like you've made that your core discipline.
Because I made more money on one multifamily deal than I did 10 houses combined.
Yeah, that'll do it.
And that's just a real thing.
So what trends do you see going on in the multifamily space right now? Because there's a lot of movement in the marketplace.
There is. So when I got started, I didn't understand everything people are talking about now. I was just trying to survive, right? I'd use real estate as my business. It was a survival mechanism. So now there's these trends, and I've been through, 3 market cycles now, and I understand what's happening. I just thought it was happening to me. Right? I'm like, oh, I'm struggling. Why? But so as to your point, like with multifamily is pretty much a stable thing because it's really based on its rents and its revenue and income. What's happening is the debt market changed. So as the debt market interest rates go up, they're, depending on the size of deals you're looking at, if you're in mom and pop properties, depending on the market you're in, 30 units and below, California 30 units is, still in the $12 million range, somewhere in there. So, but that, when you go to get financing for a deal like that and your rate went from like 4 and now it's at 7 or 6.75, it matters based on what you're going to offer for that property. Not because the property's revenue went down, but you got to put down more.
Let me just ask you a question here, right?
Sure.
So with the rates rising over the last 3-4 years, right, consistently going higher, the terms on commercial loans for these size properties are different. They're not like your standard 30-year mortgage, right? Aren't they 7, 10, 15 years? So essentially people have to refinance their debt or pay off that payment in the next couple of years. So they're looking to unload these properties.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's really the thing I didn't understand through the last cycle. I would have never sold my apartment buildings in Hawaii had I known what I know now that I've sold, because I actually went back and tried to buy them back. Same deal, still good. But that's how the multifamily works. So yeah, to your point, if you understand, when you know that the debt is like 3, 5, 7, 10, sometimes 12 and 15, but that's a longer thing. That's a longer play. Somebody has to sell or refinance within that time frame. And if the rate is adjusted, that matters. They're going to be like, oh, wow, we can't either refinance or pull out as much because it's going to affect. So that's really going to either be I think syndicators, and now that I have my own real estate fund, I understand their timelines now. Like small syndicators who just got into this a few years ago, they're the ones who are going to have to exit quickly. I'm not going to say they're going to get hammered, but it's going to take a lot to go back and say, hey, guys, talk back to their investors. Say, here's what's happening. I don't think a lot of them that were new to it because it was popular. And I mean, everybody's winning, right? It was like the belle of the ball. They're going to have to go back and restructure a lot of stuff. And guys like me who have a fund who are just totally focused, hey, we're going to build a capital company, raise money, and we're going to go,
Vic, do you have anything in your portfolio, any asset in your portfolio that is performing so well where you literally say to yourself, I am never going to sell this. My kids are going to inherit it. It is just my rock star.
No. So what we did was when we sold our last apartment buildings we got here, we started looking at 30 units, 20 units, because that was kind of the size I was playing at. And then once we started talking to our investors and realized we needed to make an adjustment, Matt asked me too. I was like, I was going to syndicate. I was like, I'll just syndicate. And then I started looking around at what was happening. I was like, I don't want to trap myself into that. So to answer your question, no, we don't. We're just raising capital right now because the next deal I do is going to be a flagship. It cannot be there. We sold all the things I would have kept. So I'm married to my future fund and those assets over the next 10 years, not my past. Because to your point, once you have an asset like that, it becomes your flagship. And if you go to a lender and they go, what kind of assets do you have now? Once they see that, they're like, all right, well, you need more experience at this level. We're not going to give you the debt. Well, you can't get that experience unless you get a combination of those deals. And if your deals right now are like these little shitty deals, the banks won't give you that money. They're going to be like, you don't have the experience in these type of assets. You need that. You got to bring on a partner. It's different. So I have not held on to anything. Everything I buy right now, subject to deals, small multifamilies, I'm just capital collection. So I sell them, because I'm raising capital. So it doesn't make sense for me to hold on to something. our next long-term holds will be our fund assets.
So Vic, I love the fact that you started in real estate by reading a book
Yeah.
and then writing your own on it. That's amazing, man. You are the American dream, as they say.
Or the nightmare. A lot of work, that everyone asked that, because a lot of people came from different backgrounds. They had jobs and stuff like that. And people like, how'd you make it? I'm like, well, I had nothing to go back to. And then at some point I had to keep going. So those two phases. First, you have to do it because you have nothing. And then you have to do it because you have everything. Right. To Luigi's point, I have a wife, I got 6 kids, I got 5 grandkids. Like now I'm in the phase where I went from hustler, entrepreneur, and now I want to be respected as a businessman that built a capital company that pushed $1 billion. Well, I want to be a billionaire, which means I have to have $5 million in assets because we're at an 80-20 in our fund split to our investors. So it's just math for me, and I hate math, but it makes sense because now I understand, where I have to hammer and how hard with my team. Yeah.
So I know you're focused on Bell Capital right now, and you got your hands full with the kids and the grandkids. Oh, yeah. What's next besides Bell? What else are you looking at? Is there another book coming out anytime soon?
No, I think I'm just focused on this. I have my real estate education company. It's called Investor School, and I teach Subject 2s. I teach multifamily, all of the negotiation strategies, give away all of my trade secrets, because I really created that initially to train my team that were coming on to work at Bell Capital.
Where can the audience find that stuff? Why don't you tell them?
Oh, wow. It's if you go to bell-capital.com/real estate training, that's that. Or in the same thing for the book, bell-capital.com/book. And if anybody Googles me, Victor Bell Real Estate, I pop up everywhere. My cell phone number's everywhere. I'm easy to find. So things like that, I love helping people. That's number one. So, if you're asking me about that, Bell Capital is really about that. And all my other trainings, I want to see people succeed because I needed help and people helped me along the way. So, yeah.
Victor, we want to be respectful for your time. We thank you for being here. Guys, go out there, check out Bell Capital. You definitely want to learn and dive deeper into Subject 2s. It's something me and Luigi are learning about. But before we do let you run, I got one question for you.
Sure.
If you pick one state to invest in right now, what would it be?
California, San Diego.
Wow. I wasn't expecting that. I know you live there, but yeah, I'm staying far away from that left coast.
Well, Matt, obviously his wife's not going to walk off a ledge.
I can be honest with you, and I say this to people, and they're like, no way. San Diego is 10 years behind what I saw happen in Hawaii. We all know the Hawaii market's just as tight and just as vicious real estate wise as New York. And I believe San Diego as a city and the county is going to be similar to what you saw happen in Miami.
Really?
I do. I'm watching the port. I'm watching what's coming up on the pipe. When they see California in the news, they're thinking LA, not San Diego.
Oh, no, we were there 3 weeks ago. I can tell you, it's beautiful there.
Yeah, it's totally different. So, we don't have all those same constraints. I think the real estate here is going to continue to go where it goes. Heavy tech, heavy bio, all that stuff is here. A lot of money is coming here, and a lot of people come here. So, the multifamily space is always going to be here. People are always going to do that.
Well, Vic, thanks for being on the show, and we'll hope to have you back soon once you get that first property under your belt, under the bill.
Yeah,
fun. Sure. Awesome. Guys, that's a wrap of the Liquid Lunch Project. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.